All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for jumping on tonight. I know it's not always easy. Evenings are hit or miss for us, and depending on which one, but I am super proud of any and all of you who are reading through this book and or jumping on here to glean and get the nuggets of information, because truly some of these principles have really stirred back into my heart just how kind of we can steer off course from what truly grows our business, right? So in the comments, I would love to know if you are listening to this, if you are reading this with your eyeballs, and maybe your takeaway from if you finished the homework or made any of the lists that we talked about in that first intro and chapters, how that kind of was helpful, working through that. I personally have been loving that all of the resources are free. This is not something that we have had to invest a lot into, but we are going to talk a little bit about that later in tonight's call. But truly just kind of shows the heart of this man has been successful in network marketing, and he is giving these resources, and so many of them are free because he truly believes in this opportunity, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. So if you don't know me, my name is Sally Lewis. I'm a diamond, also a level 2 of Jessica's, just like Megan and Carissa. And just very grateful to be partnered with these ladies. They are ones we will talk about in chapter 4 who inspire me and that I admire so much. But tonight I get to chat with you guys about probably some of the most convicting chapters that I have read, because this is an area, if you've ever heard me share my story or speak before, that I can sometimes struggle. Yes, diamonds still struggle. It doesn't matter what rank you're at. If you're not actually, like he said in chapter 4, personally developing, not just collecting information, we will stay in the same struggles and we will deal with the same things over and over. We actually have to grow and implement and learn from our experience. So I'm very excited to chat with you about this stuff today. If you have read or listened to these chapters, I know that these are things that we talk about a lot, things that I'm grateful that we have a Jessica Heffley, pouring into us and really hitting home on how important personal development is. So many things that he was sharing in these chapters, I was just like, I have heard Jessica say this so very often. And even from our corporate office, like they are presenting us with many opportunities to grow and to learn and to hear from people, whether that's book studies or things like. We really can be grateful that we have so many people to tap in and glean from. But this is just a great reminder of this. So chapter 3 starts off with the build to last mindset. And the very first quote, like I was just scribbling, I'm basically just going to read the whole book because my notes were just like everything he was saying. But he said, leadership is practice, not so much in words, but in attitudes and in actions. And to kick off these 3 chapters, I just was like, man, that's just really good to remember, because lip service sometimes is really easy. And I think as people who follow and as people who are working on leadership, it's really easy to see through that a lot of times when our words don't match up with our actions or our attitudes. And there are going to be seasons maybe you're going to have to fake it and work on it until it's real life. But just very convicting in that, like, it's important to actually work on ourselves to where our actions and our attitudes are where we're leading from, and then our words match where our hearts and our actions are, versus the other way around. Like, yeah, just believe me and do the things, even though my attitude and my heart may not be in the right place, right? So these first 7 things in chapter 3 was learning to lead yourself. I literally have done a whole video on this at some point. I don't even remember, maybe Diamonds in December or something, one of those things, about having to start with leading yourself, because until we lead ourselves, we can't lead other people because we haven't been there. We talk about if you've gone silver, you can help someone go silver. Why? Because you just bring someone along where you've been. You teach them to do what you've done. So how do we expect to be leaders of many, or many, 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 if we haven't even been there to lead ourselves to see how that goes, right? So I'm going to just go through these 7. Obviously, I don't want to go over tonight. I want to give some space for some of these action steps and kind of talking through and opening up the call. But there was just so many good nuggets, I feel like. So I did write a lot down. So if you have anything in the comments, I'm watching those. You feel free to, raise your hand or speak out into that as well. But so how to lead yourself. You walked through 7 things. Number 1, who you are becoming versus what you're getting. Now, I want you to think back on your last few months of business, whether that was, February, March, April, or this month, whatever. Were you focused? Were your goals focused more on what you were getting, what you were earning? Maybe it was a treadmill. Maybe, it's the wallet this month, versus who you were becoming. And I'm going to tell you, this is a definite trap that I fall into. And it's not a bad trap, but this is where we're trying to differentiate yourself as someone, like he talks about, like just a great distributor, someone who loves the products, who's, versus a leader who is going to grow a team, right? So our goal has to look different. Who are we becoming? And are we having action steps towards that versus just what am I getting this month or next month? And so it's really easy because, they throw out all of the carrots for us to work, which is great, but it's also how we choose to motivate our teams who maybe don't want to become leaders, right? We need people on our teams that are going after the things and what they want to get out of this, because not everybody is ready to step into leadership, but you're here because you are. So that's something. How do we lead ourselves? We focus on who we are becoming and who we want to become versus just what am I getting month to month. He said, leaders don't just believe that they can, they know that they will. And the word that sticks out to me is resolve. And in different times in my life, I can totally see, even in just my Plexus life, let's say for 9 years, I can see times where I had the I will and we're going to mindset, and I can see the momentum around that time versus this could happen, or I could, and how nothing's really going on. So we are how we lead, right? Or we lead from who we are. And so that belief of just saying, well, yeah, I can, go Ruby, or I could, go Jewel by July. But like the differentiation there is someone who's willing to say, no, I will, and I'm going to make it happen. And I'm going to figure out how, because I will. And having that belief in yourself and knowing that you will, because you're willing to do what it takes. Did that hurt anyone else a little bit when you're like, yeesh? Have you been stuck in I could, or this could happen, or I can? I think back to Angie, y'all's team, Madison and Angie. It takes guts to be in that season of, oh no, I will. I'm going to post my numbers and show you my step all the way to diamond, or my steps all the way to emerald, because we will make this happen. I know that we can do this, versus that could happen one day. And the trajectory that has led y'all's teams on, and all of the people that were able to rank up because of that comes from that mindset, right? Number 3, leaders don't just show up, they show up with their mind right. So we definitely hear a lot in this business, leaders who show up, go up. And I loved that they differentiated here, or he did, because it's not just about just showing up, right? Like sometimes we can use that as a cop out. And I think it's important to not disappear if you're going through a hard season, or, I recently lost my dad, or went through something a couple of years ago. And there were times where I wasn't showing up as I knew that I needed to be in a momentum season, but I didn't disappear. But what he's saying here is like, on a regular basis, just showing up isn't a leader mindset, right? Showing up with your mind right. It attracts higher level people. And I loved when he told a story about how he started to, say different words. And that's when he joined his guy finally, right? Because he was showing up in that different way with that mindset to be right. And he said, leaders don't necessarily want to be just a part of your team. They want to be considered a partner. Like, so you have to have your mind right to be able to attract these people that actually want to do what you're doing and partner with you and potentially be better than you're being. So how does that feel? And have you kind of heard that and just felt like, well, I'm on calls, I jump on the calls every week, or, I turned that in and I did my IPA, like, I showed up and I did lead that thing that they asked me to do. And it's like, just showing up, it's good. And we're all grateful when people show up. Trust me, I'm super grateful when people show up to my calls. But for you to know for yourself, if you want to go far and you want to be a leader of leaders, then just showing up is like baby step number one of actually having your mind right when you show up and moving forward in that way. All right, number 4, leaders understand that they run a big business. This was really cool. This is when he talked about how he looked into what starting a franchise or starting a brick and mortar business would take. And this is something I truly believe a lot of us take for granted, our opportunity, right? He talks a lot about the belief in this, like in our opportunity here, because y'all, we get to start a business for basically free. We don't have to go through schooling before we can earn like traditional jobs. I'm not in school for 4+ years or 8 years before I can earn a paycheck, and I'm starting off in a lot of debt that way. I'm also not having to take out a loan for $250,000 to pay for $1 million franchise and then like work my butt off and never see my family because I got to pay back the loan. The difference being, like he said, there's no skin in the game. And so there's not much to lose. There's just less to gain. And so we talked about last week, like the wants versus needs, or maybe that was in the 10X study, but like we have to understand it from a different perspective of like, it's all gains. You're not like scurrying to make up for something because you had to pay someone an absorbent amount of money to start this business and your family's not going to be able to eat if you don't get your paycheck. Like, this is all abundance and all extra and all more. And we get to choose to show up for the more. But I did love how he said, how would I act today waking up if I had a $250,000 loan that I was trying to pay back for this business? I would show up really differently. I think about even when I worked at Chick-fil-A in high school, like if someone's expecting me to clock in and they're holding these expectations over me, or I'm going to lose my job, why do we still work out of fear, right? Or out of like, I got to catch up, versus just working out of, wanting to work with our hands and take advantage of an opportunity and get ahead, and all of these things that are positive motivations. But I thought that was really eye-opening there. Number 5, leaders set one overarching, sorry, I was like, is that an I, an L? And then I realized it was a 1. Leaders set one overarching long-term goal. Who are my goal setters? I want to see if you are a goal setter and are very goal-oriented, goal-driven person. The longevity aspect of having that one large goal and continuing to go for it, I think for some personality types is like, wait, what? Like, but I'm never going to get there. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to take too long and I'm going to get bored along the way. And so we have all of these little goals instead that we're like, oh, but it'd be more fun just to add 3 this month and get a wallet. Oh, it'd be just more fun just to work this month for 6 and get the treadmill, or earn this trip, or just, stop here. I remember I've said this before if you've heard me talk, but when I was going for Emerald, I knew we had missed senior Ruby or something, and I knew that I wasn't going to make it in time for the Maui trip that year. And I told my sponsor, I was like, well, that's fine. Well, I'll just make it by next year. And she was like, the goal isn't Maui. Like, idiot. Like, hello. The goal is your family needs that income and you want your husband to come home as soon as possible, right? Like, so who cares about that little goal of I was trying to make July 31st so I could go to Maui and be with, all the rest of the jewels. That was like such a little goal. In her mind, she's like, what are you talking about? That is not your overarching, like, as a high level thinking leader, it's like, no, every day you wake up, you are working toward this. So what is your this, right? Like, is it having a huge team of people that are like rocking and rolling and wanting to get together all the time and showing up at convention and like having so much fun. Like for me, I just remember early on, my big goal was to like be able to sit back and have and see like dozens, if not hundreds of people that are just loving this apart from me because of the freedom it has given them and what it's, you know, done for their health and their family and their finances, and they're loving this business, and it has nothing to do with me anymore. Like I facilitated and introduced you to this amazing thing, right? And I know I lose sight of that sometimes because I get caught back up into these like little short-term goals. So big, big aha moment for me there. I hope it was for you too. Number 6, leaders create momentum and ride it. Yeah, and I think we're all like, okay, how? How do I create that momentum again? Because I think we've all had little bitty seasons and little tastes of it. Maybe you're in a season of momentum right now. How do you keep that going, right? Like, what is that? Again, this different leader mindset that's not just like, oh, good, I hit that goal because of that momentum, and now I'm going to let it sit because I don't have another goal right now, right? Like that's the difference in that overarching goal, I think, and these other principles that are going to help us create momentum and ride it. And he talked about obviously the momentum, the waves of like when you finally get up on top of the wave, you're just riding the momentum of the wave. And we've all heard that with like the mountain and the boulder rolling down the hill. But I think too, taking the guesswork out of like the next, you know, thing is like we create momentum because he says it later. So maybe I'll just wait to say that then. Anyway, number 7, leaders give themselves permission to succeed. In my personal growth journey, I find myself feeling these words, and tell me that I'm not alone if you have ever felt this way. I didn't know that I was allowed to do that. I didn't know that I was allowed to go for that. Or I didn't think that I was allowed, or like just finding myself randomly feeling like, why did I feel like I needed permission to be able to do that? Even, you know, the 10X book is really throwing me for a loop too. We're doing that. And it says in there, like, permission to live life chasing what you want instead of just always only what you need. And I'm like, I feel like I didn't realize I was allowed to just set goals for what I wanted, you know, or like just do things in life that you want. My husband's so much better at that. He's like, if you want this, just go get it. Like, if you want this to eat, like, guess what? You're a grown woman. Like, go through the drive-through and go get it, you know? And I'm like, I'm almost 40 years old and I still find myself needing like, am I just waiting for my mom to tell me like it's okay for me to go get a milkshake? Like, no, drive your car, you grown woman, and go get a milkshake, you know? So that was just like another one for me. Again, I told you these chapters were like for me. Um, give yourself permission to succeed. You don't have to wait for someone else to tell you that you can or can't do something. Like, obviously, partner with your husband, partner with the Holy Spirit. I'm not saying like go rogue, but at the same time, like, there's no committee from high school like waiting to be like, oh, you were not allowed to be successful. You were supposed to be a third-class citizen for the rest of your life. Like, nobody cares. Like, no one's watching us saying like, oh, you weren't supposed to do that in life. No, go for it. Like, give yourself permission. I am allowed to grow. I am allowed to become this vision that God has given me that I'm supposed to become. I am allowed to bring income into my home and bless my family, even if other people think that that's not okay. Like, you're allowed to do that because you are an adult and you can make your own decisions. Okay. Action steps from chapter 3. Okay, so some of this had to do with the chapters beforehand, but those goals that we wrote down, like the 5-year goal and all of those things, he wanted us to attach an income goal to that life that we wanted 5 years from now. So even if you didn't do that in your homework from last time, I think you could take a second and write down, if you visualize the life that you would want, a goal for how life would look like in 5 years, what income would that take? Right? So take a second to think about that and write a number down. Don't be stingy with yourself. You're allowed to write a big number, just letting you know. What do you want life to look like 5 years from now? And what income would that take to make that kind of life a reality? And then secondary to that, he said, what action steps would it take for you to push for it and actually go for it? And again, remember, it's about who we're becoming, right? Not just what we're doing. Like who would you need to become to have that life and that income in 5 years? What are the action steps that we would need to take to become and to be at that place? And the second action step from that was a short-term 3 to 6 month goal that is a stepping stone for your overarching big goal. So sometimes, how do you eat an elephant? If you've got your big elephant, it's not about succumbing to just the monthly goals that we're chomping away at. And that's just where you're staying. Well, as long as I do good enough in May and I earn this, as I do good enough in June and I earn this, that's this, right? Ultimately, we want to work for this. And so what is your 3 to 6 month goal? What's your next 3 to 6 month goal? That has to do with reaching this guy, not just hopping from incentive to incentive. See, that is different. This motion that I am making is different. So after you do that, your 3 to 6 month goal, that is your stepping stone for an overall goal, because you can push for something in 3 to 6 months. Think about that. In 3 months, school's just going to be starting, right? We got June, July, August. So at the end of August, where do you want to be? At the end of this year, where do you want to be funneling into 2025? And then Jessica has done this for us before. I have paid for her leading ladies coaching that she did last year and all of that stuff. And I am statements, they can feel hard because depending on who you've been telling yourself you are for your whole life, it can feel out of norm or out of character to say, I am strong. I am capable. I am willing, but what I like about I am statements, even more so than sometimes, what's the A word that we sometimes use? It's not acronym. That's the only thing I can think of right now. Affirmations. Got it. Yes, thank you, Melody. Is speaking those true statements over yourself that are biblically true because you've been telling yourself lies, right? There's a difference in feeling comfortable telling yourself the same lie about yourself over and over again, feeling like it's true, versus being able to tell yourself and speak to yourself something that actually is true and is possible. So that is something mindset wise we always need to be mindful of, is like we are listening to lies and creating lies in our mind all the time, and we're willing to listen to those and believe those and think that it's okay to speak those. But then we get weird and wonky when we're like, oh, I feel dumb, saying I am strong. I am a powerful person of purpose. What is Jessica make it say? But like, why is that weird? Okay. Any takeaways? Anyone want to share anything from chapter 3 or part of their action steps? You want to share any of that? Please let me know. You're welcome to do so before we move on to chapter 4. Anybody? No? Okay. This one also hurt. And this is a convicting statement as we are on a call doing a book study right now. I've been listening to his podcast because perk of going after your goals and being a diamond, we just bought a house that we're going to rent out as the Airbnb, and I'm having so much fun decorating it, all of the colors that I would never put in my house. Meanwhile, I am listening to this book and to next, so getting lots of personal development in, but it's literally it's literally titled Gathering Info is Not Personal Development. Honestly, I think sometimes we cop out on like, oh, garbage in, garbage out. So we just need to put all the good stuff in. And yes, it is so good to make sure you are filling yourself with truth and you are filling yourself with positive things. But that is not personally developing you. That is gathering information and knowledge. And maybe you're putting yourself like not at a deficit because you're listening to garbage or like horrible things. But yeah, gathering info is not personal development. And that is something that I definitely can feel convicted by because, again, we're just showing up. We go back to number 3 of our lead yourself. What mind am I showing up to even a book study in, or what mind am I reading the book in just to read it and say that I read it and say that I showed up and I participated? Or am I actually reading it to learn? So Sunday, our pastor spoke on, we were doing encounters with Jesus as his, topic each week for the last few weeks. And this one was the rich young ruler. So from Mark 10, and we had life group just before this where we kind of discussed those things. And I just totally lost. Maybe I'm not supposed to say that. Gathering info is not personal development. Oh, he showed, so the rich young ruler shows up and he's like, what must I do to have eternal life? And Jesus tells him, go sell everything and give to the poor and then follow me. And, the rich young ruler's like, go away sad because he's like, doesn't feel like he can do that. And I think in that moment, he was expecting to not have to change, right? Like he was showing up thinking, I'm doing everything. You named all of these 10 commandments. I got it, but he showed up with the mindset of not that like whatever Jesus says to me, I will do and I'm willing to do. He showed up maybe with the mindset that he wasn't willing to do those things. He thought he already maybe was there. And so I think rather than just showing up to things like this or showing up to your book, like we have to show up with this ability to say, I am willing to take what I'm learning and grow from it. Dude, he even said, if you listen to the podcast, I don't know if this is in like the book, if you're reading it too, because like, oh, network marketing, here, read your 10 pages a day or listen to your one podcast on the car ride to work. And I was like, shots fired. Like, okay, sir. But it is true. He said it is useless without the action to change. Like it's not personal development. So that's important for us to know. Like when we're doing our IPA sheets and it says personal development, we can just use that as a checklist sometimes and say like, oh, I skimmed 10 pages of my personal development, but good for me. Moving on, right? Like I also loved how he kind of called out the 52 books a year guy, because I totally get what he's saying. Like this guy was like, oh, I'm gonna read 52 books here. And everyone's like, that's amazing. You're gonna be so smart at the end of this. And he's like, no, that's really stupid because you're not gonna be able to implement anything that you're taking in because you're always, reading the next thing. Anyway, super and very interesting. Personal development is about who we are right now versus who we need to be to reach the goal that we just talked about. So just reading isn't going to change your heart and your mind and your habits and who you are to become that person, right? Just showing up. So I did love what he said. He's like, find your gap spots. So if you take inventory of who you are right now, that's like your red dot. We've been Cedar Rock Ministries is amazing out there in Arkansas. Like love that. And we learned about where's your red dot? Like, where are you now? You can't know how to get to where you're going if you don't know where you are. And sometimes we're not honest enough with ourselves about where we are, what we're willing to do, what we're not willing to do. So he says, find your gaps, like find those things, and then find the resources that pertain to your things that you need to grow in. And then you can implement because they are your weak spots, right? So this is where he said, find leaders you admire in your business. And then really think to yourself. So let's do another write down if you have something to write down on, or just think in your head if you're good about that. So think about someone in this business that you truly admire. You admire how they work their business. You admire their work, family, life balance, like all whatever it is. What qualities do they have that you are looking to become or wish that you were like, that you feel like you don't have, right? So I want you to list out at least 5 qualities that this person that you admire or like would like aspire to be like. What 5 qualities do you see in them that you admire about them and wish that you would develop? He said 10. So if you can jot down 10, that's great. Um, Once you have your list, he then says rate yourself next to each one of those qualities 1 to 10. So where you are at with those qualities right now, how would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? So let's do that for just a second. So when you have that list of, this is not like bash yourself of like, oh, I'm a one of everything. This is your improvement plan, right? These are the things where you say, okay, look down here and look at this one. Okay, these are a little bit lower. These are areas where I need to be improved. If this is someone who I aspire to be like, and I admire this person, and this is who I aspire to become and have these types of qualities, these are my personal development areas, right? These are my implementation plan to improve myself, who I am and who I need to become. And he said it also matters not just what we're willing to do, but to find the things in our businesses and in our lives that we are avoiding and things that we would say right now, I'm not willing to do. And that one, I can be a stubborn person, you guys. I don't know about you. Maybe you guys are not all stubborn people, but I can be really stubborn. And so I feel like my not willing to do list sometimes is probably off balance from the things that I am willing to do if I have an overarching goal of growing myself and or growing my business, right? So he says, what are things that you're not willing to do? Things that you might be scared of, or areas where you might have doubt? What are certain activities that you avoid and are, inadvertently saying, I'm not willing to do this? What feelings are you not willing to feel? What things are you not willing to commit to? And he said, your goal is to get that not willing to do list as close to 0 as possible. And that comes from your implementation of your improvement plan on those things where we're growing as a person, right? Because the more you're growing in those areas where you found that you might be lacking in right now, then the more you will be able to say, oh, I am willing to feel uncomfortable. I am willing to put myself out on a limb and do this. I am willing to persevere and have self-discipline in these areas. I am willing to dream big, even though it's scary, to put myself out there. He did also say, make sure the person that you choose to model has what you want. There are a lot of people who we talked about like earlier where maybe they're great teachers, maybe they've got a really good podcast, maybe they're like good coaches and they can teach well on topics, but if they've never achieved or aren't living out the life that you desire, we might want to rethink, not necessarily just like listening to them, but like you want to follow somebody who's done it themselves, who's living it actually, and that you can say, okay, this is real life. And then secondly, he did say, make sure that we don't neglect our business while we're working on our personal development plan, because action creates positive energy. And I think that was a really good statement, because sometimes we can get caught up and get back in the cycle of the title of chapter 4, gathering info is not personal development. Well, also gathering info is not going to grow your business. Right. So like you can pay for all the coaching and you can pay for all the courses. And if you're not actually working your business and having conversations and helping people go silver and, all of the things that grow your business, personal development is only going to take you so far. Right. But as you are implementing these things and learning to grow yourself, you will be showing up with a different mindset. You will be in activity, and that it just kind of feeds itself. We always talk about that all the time. You gain motivation from activity, not the other way around. So stay in activity. Don't let your business fall by the wayside, but have a plan in place where you're not just floating with personal development and having it as like a bystanding, check off goal. Yeah. So I would love to hear from anybody who would like to talk about their personal development journey or what that chapter kind of spoke to you. The action steps were, reflecting on the long-term and short-term goals, which 3 improvements will get you to your big goal, and then make the first step and take daily action. But truly thinking about what would your improvement plan look like versus maybe how you've treated your personal development journey so far.
Someone be brave and unmute.
Yay!
I remember Brenda Martin saying that we learn personal growth by actually working our business.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. I mean, there's still benefit, obviously, in doing books and listening to podcasts and things like that. But sometimes I think that we can fall into the ditch of, or our life is just busy. And so we're popping in podcasts or putting in an earbud or hopping on the team call. And we kind of mentally check mark that we actually worked our business that day. That
Right.
didn't, I mean, that maybe added to your knowledge base, which is still good, but there has to be a practical, like, applying of what you learn. Otherwise, we're basically information gatherers, and that doesn't move the needle forward in our business.
Yeah.
I'm going to be brave too.
Yay!
This weekend, I'm sorry, I'm driving in a car, so if you can't see me, this weekend I went to Angie Ambrosetti's diamond party, and I've checked out the last 2 months, but I got a plan of action. I got all my to-do list, and I am back on track. It doesn't matter what anybody says. I'm going to keep on doing this until I reach diamond.
So good. That belief is what we're about to talk about. So you are a perfect segue, and I'm so proud of you for allowing yourself to go there in your feelings too, right? Like you're allowed yourself to be at that party and not be like, oh, I wish like one day, or that could maybe happen to me one day. It's like, no, you've turned that back into, I will do this. And that is major. Way to go, Angie. Okay. Chapter 5 is on belief. So we're just going to moving right along. It's 9:24. We're doing pretty good. Stop me and talk if you want to. I'm just saying. Show up with the right mind. Just kidding. Kind of. Okay. Man, every one of these so far has hit me. So if they're hitting me as a diamond, I know some of these have had to be speaking to you as well. Okay. So the first quote again in chapter 5 is something that Brandon and I talk about a lot, because leaders are everywhere in every type of business, in ministries, in churches, in families, and who we are is how we lead, right? And so he said, leaders are not searchers for consensus, but molders of it. Dude, he is like reading my mail over here. I am someone who we talk about on our team a lot. Like, you have to strive to work and to live by faith, not by feedback, because I am a by feedback person. If I don't get good feedback on something, I'm like, oh, that was obviously a waste of time. Or if I don't get good feedback on something, I'm like, well, that was stupid. Like I'm waiting to hear the consensus before acting or before making a decision. And he's saying, as you're growing and trying to work on being a leader, to not be, I think there's a different level of, obviously we want to work with our teams and we want to hear what our teams need and we want to do all of that. But it's the difference in, is that debilitating you? Are you hesitating and not making decisions and not moving forward and not leading because you're waiting for people to tell you exactly what they want you to do? Are you waiting to stop a call that only 2 people are showing up to because you're just waiting for, someone to say like, no, this isn't working because you don't want to make the decision yourself? No, right? Like he's saying leaders don't keep searching for a consensus to make them feel better about the decisions they're making. They mold the consensus and then lead the team in that direction. So you're molding, that's vision casting, right? That is, this is what I see and this is what we're going to do and here's why, and let's all get on board in this direction and doing this. That was a good one for me. Just saying. Again, that faith versus feedback. Are we walking out our life by faith and moving forward in a strong, purposeful manner, or are you just sitting back waiting for feedback and waiting for people to tell you what they want you to do? Part 1 of this belief chapter, and so many of the stories that he told are really good. So if you haven't read these chapters yet, I am totally not even hitting on the best parts. I just was, trying to scribble down as many of the good nuggets as I could. I love stories. Jesus taught with stories. I love a good story, and it really does help hammer things in for me. But I think it's always good for us to remind each other and remind ourselves it's not just lip service. How much, if we could recognize and embrace the value of our opportunity and the impact that is possible with what we have. We're our own worst enemies holding ourselves back because the opportunity is there. The steps are in place, right? Like the products are there, they work. The opportunity, like if there was a book a long time ago, someone said like, if it works for anybody, it can work for everybody. So the comp plan's not the problem, right? There are people taking advantage of the compensation plan. The denominator that is not common would be the person enacting it, right? So we have to recognize and embrace the value of the opportunity and impact that we have with this business. We can't get caught up in what others think, and that makes us miss the boat on how we can serve other people. We know this, but are we telling ourselves this before we sit down to do our IPA or before we scroll Facebook? Are you showing up with the right mind that says, I have something that truly everybody needs? They don't even know it yet. I have something that will bless any and everyone who takes a hold and decides to commit to taking their products and decides to jump in and try this business. I can speak about it and I can share about it with confidence because I fully realize and recognize and embrace the value that we have in our opportunity and in the impact that we can make in people's lives. Who else cried listening or reading the valedictorian story? Okay, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to go listen to chapter 5 because it was really good. You never know what someone else is going through is the gist of that story. In a nutshell, kid had to move schools. We didn't know this yet. Someone's watching this guy cleaning out his locker, putting his books away. He's dropping all of his stuff. And he's like, man, this kid's like dropping all of his books. And he felt weird, but he's like, I'm just going to go over there and help him, right? Doesn't think a thing about it. He talks about, how they just kind of struck a conversation and how this guy who didn't have any other friends because he must have been new to the school was like very thankful. He saw in his eyes that it was like just more than just a regular like, oh, thanks, man. That was great. Like it was like so meaningful to him that he helped him pick up his books. They walked home because they lived near each other. They became really good friends. He says 3 years later, maybe I made up that number 2 or 3 years later, this kid is now like valedictorian. He is like star athlete. He's like everybody's favorite. And he gets up to do his valedictorian speech. And this guy's been his like best buddy now for those 3 years. And he gets up there and says that that day, I don't want to ruin it for you. Should I ruin it? Is that totally a spoiler alert? How many of you didn't read it? Maybe I should just ... on the story and make you go listen to the chapter. I'm not going to tell you the end. What you choose to do and how you choose to step in even something insignificant as smiling or helping someone at the grocery store or saying, hey, this probiotic actually helps with allergies, or like, hey, I'm so sorry that you guys are going through that. If you ever need to truly look at a way to make income from home, I would love to talk to you. Like, those are uncomfortable sometimes, but you never know what someone is going through and what they've been praying for and what they need to grab hold of that God can do in their lives to literally save their marriages, to save families, to change the trajectory of that person's life. We get to be a vehicle when we have our mind right and we have a full understanding of what we have to offer. We get to be a vehicle of hope for people, and the Lord can do the rest, right? Like we can see it develop in other people. You are not responsible for their happiness, but you are responsible for the actions that you choose to do or not do, right? Man, it was so good. I can't wait for you to go listen to that and then be like, okay. Visualization, which is the next part of this chapter, Jessica just talked to us about last night, and she's way better at it. So, I will try my best. Visualization, if you're like me, is something that we don't hear often enough in good contexts, and sometimes makes me feel like, I don't know if I'm supposed to do that. You know what I mean? I'm like, again, we have lived a life. You guys may not know me or our story, but like, we used to live in Africa. We, lived in a tent for 2.5 years. Like, our first kid, we raised over there for like the first year of her life, like quite literally have lived in a tent. And now we live, in a house, but we enjoy living our life with open hands. And sometimes that can stick me into a place of, I'm just going to wait on the Lord until he tells me what he wants me to do next, or until he puts me where he wants me to be. And that can be a cop out because the Lord is speaking. Yeah, he speaks through his word. He speaks as you are in relationship with him and in prayer. And he's not trying to hide from us his will for our lives and the next right thing that he would have us to do. And so if you struggle with the visualization thing, we're not manifesting. We're not talking Oprah crapola, right? Like, this is not what we're talking about here. But I do believe a lot of what he said is true. Like, you do have to have direction. Like, you have to focus on something and see it as a possibility and as something that like is real in order to work towards it. So like the Genevieve story where she's always like, you're just inviting people on a plane to nowhere. If there's no destination, like, why are you getting people on the plane? Like, that sucks. Like, here, just come get on a plane forever and do all these weird, IPA work, and then never have a destination where they actually get off and enjoy a tropical paradise, right? That's kind of how I see visualization as well. Like, if there's no goal that you can visibly see that gives you a feeling when you see it, of whether, like it was for me, I used to visualize seeing all of these people on my team in Maui that just were there having fun and going to dinner and enjoying the party, not looking at me being like, can I come with you? You know what I mean? Like, that was a visualization. I didn't know what I was doing at that time, but that's what that was. And that made me feel something. That made me feel like I want people to enjoy this. I want people to experience what this can do for them. So you do have to focus on it. You do have to see that goal in order to work toward it. Some things to think about is when you are practicing visualization, nothing we do is apart from the Holy Spirit if you're a believer. So obviously invite the Lord into that with you. Your gifts and your passions and what you care about are God-given. And so as you have these dreams and goals birthed inside of you, a lot of times that's kind of the direction, that God is steering you in your life already, because he has placed a lot of that inside of you, right? The desires of your heart, like that doesn't mean just because we have sinful flesh, it doesn't mean that all the desires of our heart are wrong. A lot of times those convictions and desires of our heart are ways that he is leading us and shaping us to grow. A vision of your future, you can think of it as your calling combined with your creativity, your blooming and blossoming creativity mixed in with the calling that God has on your life. And use prayer and your faith to combat confusion. Because sometimes I can get wrapped up into like, I don't know if it's good or okay that this is my goal, or like, what if I'm working toward this goal and this is not what he has for me, and then I'm just wasting my time. Instead of thinking about that and worrying about that, pray about that and ask the Lord that, and have him download that to your heart and say, Lord, this is what I feel like you are birthing in me, or this is the desire that I feel like you have in my heart. And so if it's wrong, I need you to slap me in the face. I need you to shut the door, but that doesn't mean we don't move forward. That doesn't mean that we don't set the goal and walk forward in faith, right? Like, we are not promised tomorrow. That's something that I wrote down. And so how are we supposed to live? Just waiting and not doing anything because we're fearful? Is that anywhere that we feel like we're supposed to show up and live our life? No. The Bible says we're not promised tomorrow. You could be as healthy as a horse and everything going great. We never know what is around the corner. Only the Lord does. And so today, what am I going to choose? Who am I going to choose to show up as for my family, for my business, as a leader? What am I going to choose to do with these skills and gifts and talents that he has given, but is also growing in me? How am I going to use those to impact people for so many reasons, but also like all of that? If you are a believer, any impact in any way that you make on another human, like that is Jesus to someone else. Like, you never know what the Lord would do with that. So, think about those things, see that the visualization aspect of that. Am I willing to do what it takes to become that person in that vision? Am I willing to do the daily tasks? Am I willing to implement the personal growth and not just collect it? Am I willing to stop believing this vision of a person who I have said that I am forever and step into who I know that God can help me become, because it's who he created me to be? And with God, all things are possible, right? Nothing is impossible apart from him. Okay, so you also have to have vision to vision cast. Vision casting is a huge thing that leaders talk about, right? Like, I know that I need to do more of that. And I know earlier on in my business, on my way to Diamond, I did a lot more of that vision casting. So whatever rank you are at, know that it will come with a sense of you have to have vision, because you've got to cast the vision for people to work and to get on the plane, right? You got on the plane because maybe you have a destination that you want to get to. And so you're like, I'm getting on this plane and it's worth doing the IPA while I'm on the plane and growing while I'm on the plane because I know my destination. But you're inviting people to get on the plane. They don't need to get on the plane because you know there's a destination. They need to get on the plane because they know that they also have a destination and a hope and a future to get on the plane. So dream big, God-sized goals, and that builds your belief. We are not promised tomorrow, so stop the doubt and procrastination. Partner with the Holy Spirit is definitely a possibility. The action steps for chapter 5 were quiet time, which I appreciate, especially as we're ending this at 9:40. You may have some time. The kids are probably already down. You may have some time before bed to actually spend some quiet moments. Thinking about how much this has been a gift to you. What has Plexus given you? So often, the book, The Gap and the Gain, we read last month. Some of you may have read that. We can so often be measuring ourselves against where we think we should be or where we wish we were, that ideal, and we're not grateful for where we are. And we can forget so many of the prayers that have been answered already for us through this business. And remember that it is a gift and not a burden. You are offering something that could absolutely explode provision for someone, just by you offering it. So let go of fear. He said, another one of those I am statements, and that I have the ability to help change the lives of those who are willing to follow because you are willing to lead. So we got 4 minutes left. Is there anybody who wants to share anything about their belief journey or their, maybe their big goal or vision or just anything from these 3 chapters that stood out to you? Come on, people in the recording really don't want to just hear me talk for an hour. They'll say, oh, you have to wait all the way until the last 3 minutes because said something and it was so wonderful. I am statement. I am not scared to unmute myself.
I'll go.
Yay, Molly.
So you just prompted I was posting while you were talking. You spurred a post in my brain, so I literally just posted confidently that and you said this, I have something that will absolutely bless anyone who is willing to listen and be consistent. And so I think a lot of times we shy away from it, like, here, try this, like, it's going to work for you. Like, and you're secretly thinking in the back of your brain, Lord, just let it help. Just let it help. Like, let them see results. And a lot of times I get discouraged because they don't see it as fast as they want. And you have to keep pushing them to keep going. And it's like, just stay consistent. You can do it. And a lot of times they're right there on the edge, like, if you know that if they just keep going that they'll be okay and that they're going to have the results that they desire. And so I think I shy away from being confident in that as I should be. And so, like, to say no, this is actually, like, this is going to totally blow your socks off, like, you're going to be absolutely blessed by this. It's something to be super confident in. So yeah.
So good. So proud of you. Everyone go find Molly's post and comment on how this has changed your life. And let's give some evidence of her confidence. Sometimes I do think that we forget too, like, we're all here sharing and we forget we're all here sharing because it has worked for all of us, right? Like, there's maybe new people and their feedback may not be like the best, but they don't know. We got to remember, who knows who's actually still feeling good after 10 years. Like, I never stuck with anything before Plexus. And like, where would I be without these products? And where, praise God that he brought this business and this community and these women into my life that have just poured into me and helped me through hard seasons. Like, what a gift this has been. And sometimes it's just spread out over so long, we just forget, that it's just like, it just has been how life has been for the last 10 years. But I would have had none of this, none of these relationships, none of this, income and these trips with my husband and abilities to put my kids in private school, like, you name it. Like, it is 100% just a gift, and it works because it is just good. It is just good stuff, and we can be confident in that.
Sally, I was thinking about when you get to your goal rank, like say it's emerald or ruby or a diamond, the feedback part often is after you've done the scary things. I was just thinking when Jessica shared her stories of her diamonds on her team and where they all came from and how she connected with them. And, one person, it was that they were a loser to one of her sample giveaways or whatever. And that person became an emerald. And then that person signed up someone that became a diamond. And there's just like different, like story after story of her 9 different separate stars. And I think that it's important to remember that often in the daily, we're not necessarily getting the feedback that we want, because in this business, there's a lot of, we're proceeding by faith and vision, which means for the messages that you send, you may only hear back from a very, very small percentage of them, but compounded over time, it makes a big difference. And a lot of times people don't give this business enough time to give them the feedback that they want because they quit too soon.
That's right.
And it's important to keep going with and keeping your vision in mind, and knowing that the right people are going to come at the right time because they're looking for you, or looking for me, you know?
And how we lead. Remember, we started off this call with how we lead ourselves, and then the personal development piece. You think about it, with someone that joins, what they're not willing to do list is probably a lot bigger than what they're willing to do list. But you growing through and chiseling away at what you're not willing to do helps you lead those people through the growth and the steps to chisel away at what they're not willing to do. A lot of people who started working this business weren't willing to post more than once a week. I remember literally making a post or a video when I first started, and I was like, don't worry, I'm not going to drive you nuts. I'm only going to do like a feel good Friday post. So don't be mad at me that I'm sharing about this. Like I was not willing to do a lot of things, but I grew confident because I saw people around me that were willing to do that. So remember, who you are is how you lead. So as you grow, as you have your implementation of your improvement plan, not just listening, right? Find those areas. Remember those action steps. They're in each chapter, but for sure, make it specific to you so that you're growing in the areas that you can help pull people along and grow behind you. All right. Won't keep you much longer. It's 9:47. So we did it right at an hour. Way to go, everybody. And Megan is recording, so she will share this recording in the pages after it uploads. But thank y'all for being on tonight. And I do hope that you were able to glean as much as I was from these chapters. And I'm excited about the rest of the book.